So glad you're here today on this Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, dads. We'll be doing some more at the end of the service and then afterwards. The advantage of being outside is we get to toss everything upside down, and it still works because we're outside and it's all different anyway. But glad you're here today as we start off talking about a dad's influence. A dad's influence. I remember when I was a kid, especially a teenager, I was functionally an only child. Because my older brothers, I was so much younger than them, that my older brothers were married and out of the house when I was, junior high-ish. So most of my teenage years, I had my dad and my mom, but I had them to myself. And so that had some certain benefits, as my brothers are very quick to remind me. One of them that I had, I remember so distinctly, several times my dad would take me on a Saturday to go see a movie. Now, I've said it several times, I'm the son of a pastor, and so that was not always easy for him to do. There was always something pulling his attention away, but he made that time for me. And I can't tell you the movies we saw, but I remember that my dad made time to take me to go see them. And, with my own children, I'm a pastor, and so now my children have the same life I did. And so I want them to not only love Jesus, I also want them to continue loving the church. Because there's a lot of pastors' kids that become adults and they get jaded. They always feel like they're second place to the church. And so with my own kids, I don't want that for them. I want them to love the church when they get to be adults. At the same time, I want them to be champions for Jesus. Oh, yeah, and I want them to be nice people, too. And, we dads have a role to play in our children's lives, in our families' lives. And I'm the first to admit I'm a realist, and I can admit it's a little tougher than maybe it used to be. Now we men have to deal with something called toxic masculinity. I had to look up what the definition was because as someone who follows politics a lot, I heard a lot of different working definitions. I want to see was there a cohesive definition. Here's the cohesive definition I found of toxic masculinity. It is a set of attitudes and ways of behaving stereotypically associated with or expected of men. That was called masculinity just a generation ago. In other words, what do they mean? They mean if you don't show emotion the same way, that's not a good thing. But men show emotion. We just show it differently. Did you know most men hide their emotions behind anger? Anger is the first emotion most men reach for, not because we're broken, but because we're men. We're wired that way. We compartmentalize. Matter of fact, this whole idea of being a man gets really complicated even when we're little boys. You see, we get in school and we get fidgety and we don't get recess and they give us medication, so we act more like girls and we just sit there. Because if you've parented boys, you know we don't just sit there. That's not what we do. We run, we play, we break things. That's what boys do. And so then you take that for a couple of generations and make those into men, at least that you let them grow up into men, and they don't quite know what that means. This really came to really stark contrast for me probably 14, 15 years ago. We were at a church north of here, and there were some young women in the young adult ministry who were lamenting. They were lamenting the fact that they couldn't find any dates. And, me being just a little bit sarcastic, I said, what are you talking about? This church is full of, completely able bachelors. What are you talking about? And they said, no, Pastor Joel, you don't understand. We don't want girlfriends. We have those. We want boyfriends. And I had to ask them what they meant, and they said they don't want a girl that looks like a man. They want a man. Now, fast forward to today, and I can understand why some of those same guys struggle to know what is a man. I mean, either we grow up and we just continue being like boys and we just play with toys, or we don't quite know what we're supposed to be. So I'm fully aware that as a man, it's a little tough to be a man. Now, ladies, we know it's hard for you too. Back on Mother's Day, we talked specifically to you. And, don't take offense at the fact that we're not focusing on you today. We did that on Mother's Day. And today, I want to talk to the guys, but ladies, we still need you because when we get to the end of the message, I'm going to tell you something very specific you can do that will help us be better men and not be the negative part of being a man, but be the positive part. See, as we talk about a dad's influence and a man's influence, we have to understand the Bible isn't silent on either one of those. The Bible tells us what we're supposed to be. The Bible tells us how we're supposed to act. The Bible tells us how we're supposed to feel, how we're supposed to show that. The Bible tells us all of that. And so today, as we look at the power of parenting from a father's perspective, This is the pairing sermon that goes back with Mother's Day. It's the other half of that. We're in the Gospel of Luke today. It's been kind of an accidental theme through this month. We've all touched in Luke somehow. But Gospel of Luke, chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. It's the whole story. Some of you are familiar with this story. It's often called the story of the prodigal son. Maybe it should be called the story of the prodigal father, but you can research that on your own, why some people think that. But it's known most of the time as the story of the prodigal son. Luke 15, 11 through 32. The first two verses start off this way, and let me set the scene a little bit. Jesus is teaching. So this is Jesus telling this story, and Jesus is talking to a Jewish audience. Now, remembering he's talking to a Jewish audience is going to come in handy in the story. We start off, 11 through 12. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Now, this was scandalous. In any time, this is scandalous. I mean, in 21st century American culture, this would be scandalous for a child to come up and say, by the way, I wish you were dead so I could go ahead and get my inheritance. That's what the son was saying. But in Jewish culture, this would have been 10 times worse. That just the social barriers that this kid broke to tell his dad, I want what's mine. Now remember, it wasn't his until the dad died. So he's saying, Dad, I wish you were dead. Give me my estate. And surprisingly, the dad does it. He divides his estate. Now, unexpectedly, verses 13 through 16, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off to a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he'd spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So this young man now is a victim of his own decisions and a victim of events far beyond his control. He finds himself now in a distant country, which was code for his audience as a way of saying he is in non-Jewish territory. He is with Gentiles now. He's with people who are not in the family of faith. He is a long way from his dad's house. He is a long way off, and he has now wasted everything on wine, women, and song, and now there's a famine, and he has to go get a job. The son of a wealthy landowner now has to go get a job. He gets a job, and he has to work at feeding pigs. Now, in the hearers of Jesus' story, there could be few things worse than having to be a pig farmer. This was terrible, a heinous way for this young man to end his life. But it gets worse, as Jesus tells him. He's so hungry, he wants to eat the pig food. But even this Gentile landowner wouldn't let him do that. This young man was really bad off. And so, verse 17, down through the beginning of verse 20. When he came to his senses, and we have to admit, until this point, he was not in his senses. He was not in his right mind. Now he comes to his senses. He says, how many of my father's hired hands have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. Now, this was definitely the smartest thing he had done, okay? This was the right decision. And I love the fact that he already knew that at some degree Dad would take him back. Now, he was hoping just to be a servant, but he knew he could at least go back. He knew he wasn't hopeless. So already Dad had done something in this young man's life. And then second part of verse 20 through verse 24. But while he was still a long way off, the father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And so they began to celebrate. Now, I love this part of the story. while the son, the wayward son who had wished his father dead and had taken half of everything the dad had and went off and wasted it, the dad saw him coming. Maybe he went out every morning and waited. Kind of like the hotel chain Motel 6. The dad left the light on for him. He waited. Now, it's interesting to note here, guys, he didn't apparently try to stop him from going. He didn't forbid him. He didn't hide his bag so he couldn't go, but he did make sure that the invitation was there. When that son had gone down a road that dad could not follow, dad made sure he was still standing in the road, so when the son came back, he was ready. And he's looking. And when he saw him maybe coming over a hill and he saw that faint figure that he knew was his boy, he did something so undignified for a man of his era. He ran. Now, mind you, he's wearing a tunic, which means to run at any speed. He had to pick that thing up. Very undignified, but it didn't matter. That was his boy. And he takes off in a dead heat, and he throws himself on his son, hugs him, kisses him. He's showing emotion. He's happy. He's not distant and aloof. He's engaged with his son, and he's so happy that he's home. And his son goes, Dad, I've sinned against you. I realize what I've done. He didn't even finish saying everything he wanted to say before the dad cuts him off and says, servants, put a robe on him. Put my ring on him. Put sandals on his feet. This is my boy, and he's home. And the dad welcomed him back. Now maybe there was a lecture later on, but right here, it was just, I'm glad you're home. Wasn't I told you so? There was just, I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're here. The father was ready to receive him. Even before the son turned around, he knew what he was going to do. And he welcomed him back home, and he has a celebration, an expensive celebration. Slaughtering a calf was no small feat. And they ate steak. I mean, they ate well. There was music and dancing, and because his son was alive again. He had his boy back. And he spared no expense in celebrating it. Now, so far in the story, we've talked about the dad. We've talked about the younger son, but there's still the older boy. Here's what happens to him. Verses 25 through 30. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called to one of the servants and asked him, what was going on? Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, come home, you kill the fattened calf for him. Now, it's easy to criticize the older son. But put yourself in his shoes. He was in the field when the party started. What was he doing there? He was doing his job. He was doing what was expected of him. He was the good kid. He was the one that obeyed the rules. He was the one that didn't get in trouble. He was not the baby of the family that got away with everything. This was the firstborn who was responsible and faithful to the father. He did not wish his father dead. He didn't take his father's property. He worked for his dad. He showed his loyalty and love for his dad by being the good kid and not causing any trouble. And then he says, you wouldn't even give me a young goat to celebrate. But when this son of yours, he didn't even acknowledge him as his brother. When this son of yours comes back, you throw this extravagant party on his behalf. He wasted half of your estate on things that would be scandalous and terrible. He's saying, Dad, what are you doing? What are you thinking doing this? Now look, if we're honest, we don't blame the older son for feeling that way. We'd probably feel the same way. But the dad in the story, though, he's got some emotional clout with both of these kids. He knows both of these young men. He knows what they need, and he deals with the sons differently because they're different people. So how he responds to this son is different. Look at what he says in verses 31 and 32. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Now see, the dad starts off giving him some practical advice. Yes, son, you are always with me. That's the point. Son, anything I have when I die, all new wealth that I gain, anything that you help me gain for this land, it's all yours. Your brother has already spent his inheritance. That's it. There is no more for him. You will have everything I have. You get the lion's share of everything because you have been faithful. You have been loyal. Son, you've done the right thing, and that will be rewarded. But, then he gives the correction. But, because your brother was lost, because your brother needed grace, we needed to show it. Because he was lost and is now found, we need to celebrate. We need to rejoice when someone figures it out and comes back. They need to know that when the light is on, the light is in fact on, and that our arms are open. He's teaching his son grace. He's teaching his son what he will need. He's teaching him mercy. He's teaching him gratitude. He's teaching him that he needs to remember when. He needs to remember when he received mercy from the Father. He needed to remember when he received grace from the Father. He needed to remember when he needed Dad to show some mercy. Now, there's a lot of things we can learn from this story. There's so much in here in the story Jesus tells. There's so much richness in this text of how the dad deals with his two sons and how he deals with them differently, how he shows emotion, how when the moment came he'd rather be undignified and show that affection to his son. And of course, he's also teaching them the whole process. But one thing we can learn on this Father's Day in 2021 from a story told over 2,000 years ago is this. The power of a father is released when he is invested in his family's lives. It's not released when we add another zero to the bank account. It's released when we are invested in our family's lives. It's not released when we give a really good lecture and then just check out for the next week. No, it's released when we are invested in our family's lives. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4 encourages, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Now, guys, he's not saying don't punish them. That's a good way to raise jerks. He's not saying that. He's saying don't make them resent you. Don't put them in no-win scenarios, in situations they cannot win with you. You're mad if they do right because they could have done better, and you're mad if they do wrong. He says, don't exasperate them. Don't do that. Instead, lead them by the hand and point them to Jesus. Show them the way of the Master. Show them what they need to be shown, and don't put them in settings where they can't win. Don't exasperate them. You know, one of the most liberating things I ever heard about parenting was actually from a spiritual mentor who was a great-grandfather. And I don't remember anything else he said in that class. I was taking a class with him. I don't remember anything else he said. But I remember this one thing. He said, you are not modeling perfection. You're modeling redemption. Man, I'm going to tell you what, man, that's a load off my heart. I don't have to be perfect. And you know what? Even in my imperfection, I can still show them what redemption looks like. I can still show them what it looks like to be redeemed. Not perfect, very imperfect. But I get to show them, what does that look like? What does it look like for me to receive grace? What does it look like for me to say, I messed up, I'm sorry, can you forgive me? What does that look like when I model redemption and not try to model perfection? Because the power of a father is released when he is invested in his family's lives. So I want to encourage you to use the power of a father for the Lord. I mean, I'm coming at this from the Bible's perspective. That's my bias. That's where I'm coming from. That's where I'm pointing to. I'm trying to get men to act more like Jesus. I want men to model our Heavenly Father better. That's what I want. And guys, if you're here, you are the champions. You're here, you're doing it. And I'm trying to fan the flame for you to do more of it. Because we want to be cheerleaders for what you do, because we need you and we love you and we appreciate you and we value you. So one thing I do personally is I try to invest in my kids' lives individually. I try to spend time with them, at least minimum once a week. I still take them on dates. I still want to spend time with them. I try to make sure there's a time in the week that I sit down, I listen to what interests them. I listen to what they're fascinated by at that moment. Is it the most interesting thing in the world that I might want to be doing? Maybe, maybe not. Is it the thing that's going to add another zero to my bank account? Probably not. But my future, my legacy, the proof that I existed is in my kids. That's my legacy. I mean, I want to make an impact on you all. Don't get me wrong, I do. But ultimately, it won't be you that proves that I live. It's my children and their children and their children. That's the proof that I lived. That's the proof that I gave something to the next generation. And that's what I want for you dads, to realize that that's the gift God has given us to invest in the future. So it doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. It's not about that. Love is not spelt money. It's spelt T-I-M-E. It's spelt with investing personally, individually. Not about the money you spend. Now, ladies, I told you we would need you towards the end of the message. Here's where we need you. We need you to pray for us. Now, we know at Mother's Day, we talked about how you gals have it rough. I was just laughing this morning with Tony about how Tony Simeon, who's our facilities guy, also does our men's ministry. Right now is also doing junior high and high. God, you do a lot around here, actually, Tony. But one thing we were talking about was like on Mother's Day, I mean, it was even controversial to say mother because now mothers are called birthing parents. Moms, I get it. You get it. You got it rough. We're trying to take away your womanhood. But we need your prayers for us men, too, to figure out how to be men today, how to lead well as men and how to do that and how to raise the next generation of men and to get this right and to invest well in them. We need your prayers. And ladies, I'll give you a single piece of advice. I don't like giving a whole lot of advice to people that aren't my children. But here's a piece of advice I picked up years ago, ladies. Here's something that your husband wishes he could say, but can't. But I can because I don't live with you. Okay, you ready? It's this. Some of you are going to catch that joke later. Here's the piece of advice. Ladies, praise him publicly, criticize him privately. Don't criticize him publicly. Don't tear him down in front of people and tell people what a meathead he is. He probably is. But don't tell everybody that. Praise him publicly. Don't let the negative come off your lips. And then privately, I'm not saying you tear him apart, but privately you can say, hey, when you do that, you are a real animal. Stop. Stop eating with your hands every time we're out in public. Stop. Use a napkin, not your pants, okay? Do that privately. Publicly, you may have to work at it, but publicly praise, privately criticize. Pray for him, encourage him, build him up. Now, dads, men, I want to encourage you, keep doing it. Keep engaging, keep working at it. Keep investing in your wife. Look, I've done enough counseling over the years to know 9 times out of 10, when a man comes in and tells me his wife is cold, 9 times out of 10, it's something he's not doing. See, men, that's something your wife wishes she could tell you. It's what you're doing. It's what you're not doing. It's because you're not doing today what you did that got you married. Guys, what got you married keeps you married. The way you wooed her to say yes to you, keep doing that stuff. And you won't be talking to guys like me. Some lady agrees with me. Yes. That's true. Look, I can tell you, if my wife and I ever have issues, 9 times out of, not 100%, she's not perfect, but 9 times out of 10, it's me. Men, we can do better, right? Think through that. What's one thing you can do today for her that is something you used to do? Maybe it's as simple as you give her a hug. Maybe it's just you say, good morning. You smile. You say, Joel, I'm not really a smiling guy. Then work on that and smile at her. Or maybe you come in and the first thing you say, instead of, man, I hate my job, maybe it's, hey, how was your day? What's one thing you can do? One thing you can do to invest into her. What's one thing you can do to invest in your children? What's one thing you can do to invest in them? I'll tell you one tidbit I was given years ago. Because we men, we compartmentalize. Now, ladies, you might not understand that, but it means we really have slots for everything in our lives. We have little boxes in our brains, and we close one box and we open another. And if we open 2 boxes, the whole toolbox falls apart. We can't open 2 at once. Some of us can, I can't, okay? We have these little boxes, okay? So guys, here's what we can do. Here's some advice I was given on how to help the family box. Find yourself a landmark on the way home. Maybe it's a stop sign or your favorite restaurant or a certain intersection. Any landmark you can always find. For me, it's Yosemite. I always had to go through Yosemite every time from home to here. When you hit that landmark, you think about home from that point forward. Don't think about work. Close that box, open up home. Think about her. Think about the kids. Think about what you're going to do. If you still need time to unwind, get in the garage and kind of putter around for a few minutes. But whatever you do, don't think about work. Don't think about the project. Don't think about what's going wrong. You think about them. Open the family box. And then when you go back to work, you just hit that same spot and do the reverse. Close family box, open up work box. It will help immensely in helping you to do those things we need to do to invest well. Because again, you're here. You're doing it. I mean, you're the ones leading. That's why you're here. I'm not beating up on you. I'm saying let's do more of that. Let's see what we really can do. Because our influence, our power is released when we have influence in our families, when we're invested in their lives. Because we're not modeling perfection. We're modeling redemption. So guys, it's okay to be a man. Be a man. Be a man that wants to get outside and do stuff. You want to work with your hands? Work with your hands. You want to protect? Protect. You know, my dad always taught me there was one thing I would never get in trouble for as a kid. One thing, because I was always a big guy. He always told me, son, I will never get on to you if you're defending someone who's weaker. My dad was trying to teach me how to be a man and how to use my strength to help others. And that lesson stuck with me because he wasn't afraid to tell me it's okay to be a man. It's okay to want to do something and to fix something. That's okay. Guys, be a man. Be a passionate man. Don't be a wallflower. Be a passionate man. Be a godly, passionate man. Be a godly, passionate man that our world can follow. Because that's your power. That's the power of a dad.